Okie dokie, it's time for our mayoral candidates forum. Our moderator this evening is Peter Rice. Peter is the founding editor of Downtown Albuquerque News. That's a digital newspaper he started a couple years ago. It's about the city's center and surrounding neighborhoods. Peter's lived in New Mexico for 15 years, and he's worked at both KUNM and the Albuquerque Tribune. He covered the city beat there. So he's well qualified for this forum tonight, and we're very grateful for his participation. And I'm going to turn it over to him now. Do we have all of our candidates?
It looks like it.
Manny, Tim. Okay, fine. Okay, Peter.
All right. Thank you so much, Merritt. And welcome to everybody who is just joining us in this forum featuring the three candidates for Albuquerque Mayor, Eddie Aragon, Manny Gonzalez, and Tim Keller. Our forum tonight, which is presented by the Near North Valley Neighborhood Association, will last for 1 hour, during which time our candidates will entertain a series of questions submitted by Near North Valley residents, others throughout the city, and in one or two cases, myself. I will read the questions and then call on each candidate in turn to answer, though we will frequently and randomly change the order in which candidates are called on. We also plan to do one round of questions directed at specific candidates, and in that case, they will be the only ones answering their respective questions. Members of the audience still have a chance to submit their own questions, and I invite you all to do so in the chat. The more of those questions that apply to all of the candidates, the better. Each answer will have a time limit of either 1 minute, 1 minute 30 seconds, or 2 minutes, depending on the general complexity of the question. When you have 30 seconds left, Near North Valley board member Ernest Gonzalez will hold up a warning card stating as such, so please keep an eye on him and perhaps pin his Zoom picture to your particular setup there. When your time has expired, Ernest will hold up a card that says, time's up. In rare cases, I may allow an extra 30 seconds for all candidates for rebuttals. The usual basics of common civility also apply tonight. Talking over each other doesn't work very well in person, and it tends to be worse on Zoom. If need be, I have a team of hosts here that reserve the right to mute those who talk out of turn. With that, let's do a very quick introduction of each candidate that will double as a sound check, which I've found is never a bad idea in the Zoom era. So in alphabetical order, we have candidate Eddie Aragon. He's the owner of a radio station and a talk show host. Welcome, and how are you doing this evening, sir? You are on mute.
Right. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Thank you so much.
All right. Just want to there you go. We tested the sound check. Good evening, everybody. I'm Eddie Aragon. I am the owner of the Rock of Talk, which is an AM radio station here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I'm an 11th generation New Mexican, father of two.
We're going to get to your opening statements in just a sec. I just wanted to do a sound check here.
Okay, I didn't know. I thought we would start right off. Thank you.
There, but we'll get back to you in just a sec. Candidate Manny Gonzalez is the Bernalillo County Sheriff. Welcome this evening, sir, and how are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, and we can hear you just fine. Thank you so much. And finally, candidate Tim Keller is the mayor of Albuquerque. How are you this evening?
Good evening. Good to see everybody.
All right. Thank you so much, and we can hear you as well. So to start our discussion tonight, we would like each of you to make an opening statement, introducing yourselves and your campaigns. We will do so in alphabetical order one more time before we start switching things up. You each have 2 minutes, and we will begin with Mr. Aragon. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Rice. I appreciate it. I am Eddie Aragon, as I stated before, 11th generation New Mexican. Care deeply, as do all of our candidates, about this great city, which is why we're all running for mayor. And I'm excited about the opportunity. And I'm the father of two, graduate of St. Pius X High School, a student of both public and private school, and a graduate of the University of New Mexico with degrees in political science and economics. And I got to tell you, looking at the state of our city, the state of our state, but particularly the largest population in the entire state, Albuquerque, New Mexico, we have suffered. And I know that we are all going through this, both due to the corona pandemic, as well as the lack of economic growth that has not just brought on, but that has been induced even before that lost decade that we have all inherited. I'm just going to make a brief statement about my candidacy and what I'm doing. And we are all about going from failure to first. It's going to take generations. We're not even an average city at this point. Albuquerque is a place that I am certainly proud to be from, proud of. But this is a very difficult time for many people to go ahead and be proud of Albuquerque, because a lot of people are picking up and leaving. You know people, I do as well. We have the 5 C's that we're focused on in terms of and of course, we're running the city of Albuquerque. The 2 gentlemen who are my opponents are already doing so, and I'd like the opportunity to express my vision on behalf of the city of Albuquerque. The second C, of course, is crime. That's one of the things, I appreciate that. One of the things that we have talked about at length, record homicides at 86. Commerce, business, as a business person, as a business owner, you've seen that suffer. And of course, corruption. That has been a huge deal here in the city of Albuquerque. And so when I express my points very simply, the 5 points, that's what I'm running on here in the city of Albuquerque. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Aragon. Mr. Gonzalez, your opening statements, 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm Sheriff Manny Gonzalez III. I was born and raised in Albuquerque. Shortly after I graduated from high school, I went to the United States Marine Corps and served there honorably and meritoriously. I have a beautiful family. In my upbringing, I was raised to have work hard and serve people. Through that time, after I came back from the United States Marine Corps, I happened to pursue a career in law, and I've been serving there for 30 years. But I've also had the opportunity to spend 20 years, and I'm bringing these 2 different things I've been very successful in to the candidacy of mayor. But that's not the way it always was. When I first took office on January 1st, 2015, the very demoralized, second-rate, very politically polarized department. And also, the county was facing a major deficit. But I didn't run away from those challenges. What I did is we did more with less. And I had a vision and a plan for the sheriff's office. More importantly, I have the success of doing that no other candidate has had. And I want to be able to transfer those skills to those 3 major things that my platform's about. One being, first and foremost, is crime, it's homelessness, and the third is jobs in the economy. I think would bode more well for the citizens who I put first and not politics, unlike other candidates. The leadership that Albuquerque needs to be successful, because we need to take this opportunity for everybody to thrive and restore Albuquerque to the crown jewel of the Southwest. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. And a quick note, I've noticed a couple of people in the chat saying that they can only see my face on their Zoom feed. First of all, I want to apologize for that. You could do better on this Zoom call. But second, if any of the other hosts know if that's a problem we can handle, or if that's a problem on an individual's Zoom, you've been given an FYI there. All right, we conclude the opening statements with Mr. Keller. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thanks so much, Peter, and good evening, everyone. It's been my honor to serve as your mayor the last 4 years, and I think folks are pretty familiar with my background, but was born and raised in Albuquerque as well, and I have 2 young children attending APS schools. And when I think back about 4 years ago, I asked voters to trust me to lead, and I pledged that we would face our toughest challenges head on, and that we would dig deep and address root causes on crime, homelessness, jobs, and security, and that we wouldn't shy away from tough decisions. And I think we've honored that commitment and respected the magnitude of those challenges with resolve and dedication, not with one-liners and sound bites about how easy it is to address any of this, because none of these are easy problems to fix. Now, last year, COVID-19 pandemic also presented a crisis like no other. And we worked hard to make decisions that saved lives and livelihoods and to keep us safe. We're starting to do that again as the pandemic comes back. So we've changed our city's approach to policing with the new community safety department. We also continue our commitment to adding resources, whether it's for diversion or whether it's everyday officers on the street. we stepped up and we have put out a vision and purchased the Gateway Center to find meaningful answers for homelessness. And we also know that we have announced thousands of good paying jobs coming to Albuquerque's working families, more than have been announced in the last decade combined. So with revitalized public safety efforts and what we're doing with homelessness and jobs, I believe this is on top of our nationally leading sustainability efforts. And so now is the time to continue going in the right direction, to keep moving forward and hit the accelerator and not move backwards. That's why I'm running for re-election.
All right, thank you very much. Question one for the lot of you here tonight is about homelessness, homeless encampments rather, that have become endemic in our area. They are a problem on several different levels, whether the goal is public safety, clean and walkable environments, appealing parks, a friendly business climate, or indeed a safe place for people without homes to be. The encampments are not helping us get there. What are your plans for dealing with homeless encampments throughout our area? And do those plans include the creation of officially sanctioned camps, which are sometimes known as safe outdoor spaces? You have 2 minutes, and we will begin with Mr. Keller.
Thank you for that question. And let me make sure I know you guys can hear me. Okay. So I support an all the above approach, and I think that's what you need. We have over 5,000 homeless people unsheltered in our streets. And I know that to try and help all of those 5,000 people, you have to do different things based on their unique situation. And so there's several things that we've been doing. Is number one, you have to reach out and offer help. That's why we've been increasing our community outreach officers, and that's part of even the new community safety department that we're building. And eventually, though, we still do enforce things like you can't have people camping in dangerous areas. And so we do have folks doing that, but there's a huge backlog. So against this backdrop, though, is, I think, a national situation coming out of the pandemic where homelessness is growing everywhere. And that's why what we have to do is we have to provide somewhere where they can go and where people can take them. And that's the idea behind the Gateway Center. The idea is you've got to have somewhere that's open 24/7 where folks can go voluntarily, or our service outreach providers can take them and they can get shelter, and then they can be triaged in terms of, do they need to have behavioral health services? Do they need mental health services? Do they need a housing voucher? Do they need job training? These are the kinds of things that we know we can offer, but we cannot do that until we have this 24/7 center. And that's why I stepped up after the voters approved it and purchased the old Gibson Medical Center so that we could build that facility. And I will tell you, until we have that, we are not going to make a major dent in our unsheltered population.
All right, thank you. Mr. Gonzalez, you are next with 2 minutes.
Can you repeat the question just so I'm clear on it?
Oh, sure. Homeless encampments have become endemic in our area. What are your plans for dealing with them? And do those include officially sanctioned camps, sometimes known as safe outdoor spaces?
Okay, thank you for repeating that question. So we live in a checkerboard community, and I just want to make it very clear that this isn't a national epidemic. We do not have the same issue in Bernalillo County and the unincorporated areas because we have a very robust plan and service to provide help for those people that are in crisis. I don't necessarily label them as people as homeless. Those are people in crisis. I happen to sit on the President's Commission for Homelessness, Mental Illness, and Substance Abuse. And you have to be able to screen these people and provide them with the wraparound services that they need in order to identify their diagnosis on their issues. And so you're going to find out through screening and proactive mobilization of resources to include law enforcement, public health, behavioral health, to screen these people to identify the help they need. Because sometimes some of these individuals are choosing to either ingest, smoke, shoot up fentanyl and other illicit drugs in our community. And nobody is enforcing those public ordinances that need to be enforced. Because literally there's thousands of needles throughout the metro area on a daily basis. And it's a public health issue that nobody's addressed on the state or city level. We will remedy that by staffing and find the services and resources those people need to be successful.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Mr. Aragon, 2 minutes.
Thank you for the question. We have 1,534 people, or 84 people, that are out on the streets. We've become a destination and a haven for homeless people. We have catered and coddled homeless people, and I can tell you right now, at this point, the approach that we've taken isn't working. Whether it's building tiny houses, 8 of 40 that are actually filled due to the fact that they can't get clean, there's certain requirements to get in. We spend an extreme amount of money, and I know construction pretty well from a small business and the son of a contractor, at $950 a square foot. Housing them and taking these guys on and keeping them here isn't helping us. You certainly have seen the number of people, and temporary homeless people generally find themselves in hotels. We've had 11 murders that have taken place here in hotels here across our great city. Unfortunately, as we continue this approach where we set up competition by creating more government solutions for homelessness rather than enable the nonprofit organizations and especially the churches out there who are willing to do anything and everything they possibly can to go ahead and bring them in. Most homeless people, and I will tell you, as the grandson of a homeless grandmother who was mentally ill, she did not get satisfied and get taken care of until we brought her in. And one of the things that we need more in our city is more love and more caring. Churches are a great place for that, not to mention lots of nonprofit organizations. But when the government and our mayor is setting up competition for them, they won't go there, and he's deferred. My great friend, Jeremy Reynolds, had a lot of problems when Mayor Keller decided to go ahead and step in and start competing with them. So we need to help these nonprofit organizations. To Manny Gonzalez's point, they don't need to be audited. These are organizations that are willing to take them on. And when people have passion, they can actually have purpose in their life, and they need to do that for themselves. And we can certainly aid that, but we can't take on the entirety of that problem. We need to stop bringing them into the city of Albuquerque. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Aragon. Right on time there. For our next question, I want to first give a quick note of orientation. We will be asking you all about crime as a general topic in a little bit, but right now we'd like to focus on an extremely local criminal justice matter because we understand that the city has made a commitment to create a special public safety district in the area around the new homeless facility planned for the Gibson Medical Center property. This would apparently be modeled after the downtown public safety district, which is a group of several officers who work a dedicated beat in the central business area. What is your position on public safety districts generally, and would you support such a district in the 4th Street corridor from roughly Mountain to Manal, where prominent homeless services have been located for years? You have 1 minute for this question, and we'll begin with Mr. Gonzalez.
So that was in reference to the Gateway Center, correct?
And special public safety districts around the Gateway Center and potentially 4th.
Sure. After several conversations, I'm fully aware that the tiny village and there's other facilities that aren't being utilized. I think we need to be a lot more aware, a lot more responsible when we're making decisions and spending taxpayers' money when there's other facilities that aren't being adequately used. And so I think the strategy moving forward was to make sure that we develop a plan where you get compliance from the people that choose to live out in the streets versus that. So you have to have a very balanced carrot and a stick approach to getting people the services they need in some of those special districts, and then consider maybe repurposing the Gateway Center as not such a good idea until we can fill and not waste tax-paying dollars on facilities, and again, screen those people for their needs and not just recklessly spend money. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Okay, a public safety district for 4th Street, roughly between Mountain and Manal. Mr. Keller, you have 1 minute.
Sure. Well, these public safety districts have been, they were an idea that I had coming in, and I think the downtown one has really shown how helpful they are. So I think they're a very good idea. I believe in going back to that kind of beat cop model, which is similar to community policing. It's just a notion of dedicated officers that get to know their committee. And so that get to know their community. And so I think this is a very good idea, and we should do it as much as we can where resources are available. I'd like to have them all over the city. I would mention that we have 5,000 homeless people unsheltered on our streets. So there is no, one particular thing that is going to help them. That's why we need an all the above approach. And, I'd also mention we already pay nonprofits $20 million to take care of homeless folks, and they are totally maxed out, and they are asking for more help every day. And that's why we've got to do this together as a community.
All right, thank you, Mr. Keller. Mr. Aragon, 1 minute.
I don't really understand the response there with regard to the public safety measures or the reference to homeless in terms of the nonprofit. I don't know if we're addressing the previous question, but here's what I could tell you is that this approach from Mayor Keller has ceased to work. It has not worked at all. You've seen a number of my videos that have been on Facebook. We've seen the piling up of the homeless people that has happened downtown. We're all three of us at this point are almost addressing it as a blight and a level of criminal element. I don't know that anybody can actually establish or any burqueño here in the city of Albuquerque can say what a public safety zone actually is or what it even means. It has no meaning whatsoever. The whole idea of the cop on the beat, or as we heard from this morning in the last gasp effort by Mayor Keller to go ahead and put a cop on every corner, is just absolutely ridiculous. There's no penalties for the criminals. As we know, it's a judicial system. It's a, be really nice to the criminals. And I got to tell you, approach hasn't worked.
Thank you, sir. We've come to question 3, and this will be the individual round where we ask each of you a separate question. And this is, if this is a job interview, then this is the time when we ask about your weaknesses, possibly throwing a little chin music in here while we're at it. We will begin with Mr. Aragon.
Okay.
Nobody would deny your talents as a communicator, but there is much more to city government than making a concise and entertaining point. So far as we can tell, you have never managed a bureaucracy, never held even a minor elected office, and never been extensively involved with the kind of neighborhood issues that so often serve as a training ground for our future leaders. Shouldn't this lack of experience disqualify you from being mayor of Albuquerque? You have 1.5 minutes.
Well, if you didn't know anything about my background, you'd know that I was the #1 real estate transactions in the city of Albuquerque. North Nevada. I was a top performer in terms of NAIOP, working with neighborhoods, working with commercial real estate developers, working with tenants, working with private businesses. These are the people that are the feet on the streets. Working our bureaucracy is about leading. Manage what we need to lead. I've heard from so many people in the city of Albuquerque who are completely and totally dispirited with the way that they have been trained. I'm a leader. I don't manage. I teach. I lead, giving people ideas, and I help people see a vision. That's what I've always been given, and I can tell you what I've always done, but I can tell you each and every day I address each of these issues on my radio show, and I carefully consider the solutions that are brought to me. What's happening right now at City Hall? No one's listening. What's happening in our police departments? No one's listening. Everyone thinks that they come in with this remedy about how they're going to take everything or an agenda or a formula. It's not about it. We fail to listen to each other, and everybody seems to have the right answer. I never claim to have the right answer, but what I do is I always listen to go and make sure that we can execute together. We're all in this together. There's no doubt that my experience, both as a business person in this community, is well established, and I'm willing to go ahead and take the responsibility for the decisions that I make on behalf of the community, which is something that neither of my two opponents have done.
Thank you, Mr. Aragon. Next, we go to Mr. Keller. Crime is, of course, top of mind in our city. Homicides are at a record high, and just last week we saw the horrific shooting at Washington Middle School. Meanwhile, our jail is running below capacity. Drug dealers and thieves seem to be operating with impunity, and calling 911 can sometimes result in spending several minutes on hold. For 4 years, you have had countless millions of dollars and hundreds of law enforcement officers under your command, yet these problems persist and even grow. Shouldn't this state of affairs disqualify you from being mayor of Albuquerque? You have 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Peter. Well, there's no doubt crime is our biggest challenge, and it is exactly what I said when I was in this forum 4 years ago. And so I think the measure of my leadership is how I've been able to deal with that. Number one is I've been able to continue my commitment to hire 100 officers each year. And that's really important because when I came in, the department had been decimated. And so when you talk about some of the outcomes that you outlined, whether it's response times or whether it's what's happening on our streets, a big section of that is because of our lack of resources. Now, unfortunately, we've had lots of retirements, especially coming out of the pandemic. So we still face that backlog. But I also know that you have to address crime at a root cause. And you can't do that with just a talking point, saying you're going to be tough on crime or saying that you want to fix crime. Real leadership means addressing the problem with the respect for how difficult it is. And that means doing things like the Gateway Center to get people behavioral and mental health treatment. It means creating new departments like the Community Safety Department. And it also means continuing our efforts for reform. It is not a choice. And community trust is also what keeps us safer. And we need a mayor who is committed to all of those aspects, not just one thing. And I think that's what my administration has demonstrated.
Thank you, Mr. Keller. And finally to Mr. Gonzalez. City government is all about getting the details right. And yet, 2 separate investigations have now concluded that members of your campaign, including allegedly yourself, submitted fraudulent paperwork as part of an effort to obtain taxpayer-supported campaign financing through the city's clean election system. As sheriff, you swore an oath to uphold the law. Shouldn't this situation disqualify you from being mayor of Albuquerque? You have 1.5 minutes.
Thank you for the question. Absolutely not, because neither of those complaints have been substantiated. There's a rule of law we live by. We trust the process. We're still going through the process. We're still waiting. But here's what's going on. With overwhelming support, why would I need to bother to forge signatures and donations? I could easily get 10 times the number of signatures to qualify. Here's why the incumbent is using his privilege and position of power to disenfranchise a minority candidate from running to replace him because of his political agenda. And so for me, I always put people first. I have an impeccable career in the United States Marine Corps. I have an honorable family. I have an oath to the Constitution. I pledge my loyalty to the people of this community, and I would never breach that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. We will return to questions that each of you gets to field in turn. As mentioned before, crime is, of course, a big problem in Albuquerque, so big that it basically requires no further explanation. But we want to know what you're going to do to turn things around if given a chance during the next 4 years. You have 2 minutes, and we will start with Mr. Keller.
Sure. Well, when it comes to crime, I think it's important that we continue the things that I mentioned a moment ago. But, I think one thing that would help crime is, frankly, if the sheriff would just help us with crime. The situation is on his watch for the last 12 years, 7 years, we've seen the same thing. And crime's just as bad in the county. And so I think we need to work together. And that's why I formed the Metro Crime Initiative. It has every single law enforcement agency in the metro area at the table every 2 weeks coming up with real answers for violent crime. The only person that doesn't show is our sheriff. And here's what we're talking about. We're talking about fixing and adjusting things like how we deal with diversion, but also how we deal with grand juries and with the CMO order, which we can talk about more if people have questions. But how do we stop that revolving door? How do we fund parole officers, which we desperately need? Because the system needs help, not just APD. And it takes a leader who's willing to take responsibility for our problems, and that's what I do. I'm not going to point fingers. I'm not going to blame anyone else, but I am going to ask for help because there is no way a single person can do this by themselves. And that's why I'm asking the governor and our legislatures and our DA and our AG for help, and they are responding. And so I know for low-level offenders, we got to bolster diversion programs, but for violent offenders, we have to stop the revolving door. And to do that, you have to work with other people. And I also want to mention that we have a large technology investment coming online that's very important. I've invested over $38 million in crime fighting in Albuquerque, and all of those programs, including gunshot detection, are coming online this winter. So we are in a much, much better place as a department than we were 4 years ago. And most importantly, I'm leading our community together to fight crime. And that's what it's going to take to get us out of this very difficult situation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Keller. Mr. Aragon, you are next. You have 2 minutes.
I'm disappointed in the mayor at the very same time that he's saying, we're working together, we're doing what we can. He's bagging on Manny Gonzalez, and there's no way to tell whether or not he is or isn't cooperating. And what these guys are playing politics. We need to be focused first on crime. This is everyone's problem, no matter who it is. What I can tell you is I can tell you what I'm going to do. Not going to play politics. I'm not going to let these guys go ahead and fight it out in terms of who's getting the better thing. I'll reduce every category of crime going forward. Assaults, murders, car theft. I mean, how easy is that to do if you just care enough and communicate to enough people? I'm going to force longer detainment of criminals. Jails are empty. There's no bail bondsmen. I'm going to stop making officers do their job over and over. The same criminals every 48 hours. I talk to the APOA 3-4 times weekly with Sean. I'm going to force longer detainment of drivers with THC in their system. That's something that we can actually do because it's a Schedule I drug. Remember, politics transcends culture. People need to understand that. Stage officer pay, remove overtime. That's $20 million right now. These guys need to have balanced lives. There's over 160 officers who are making over $100,000. That's crazy in a lot of this chief's overtime. I'll have a no settlement policy. It's something we should have got a long time ago with attorneys. We'll have the city of Albuquerque protect its officers. We'll block qualified immunity from being operational here in the city of Albuquerque. I will make that happen. We need to support our police. That's job one. We've got to improve the morale of our Albuquerque Police Department. Instead, what you've seen is the outgoing guy, Chief Geyer, and then the incoming guy, Medina. Nobody cares about that drama. While they're fighting and more politics all under Tim's watch, we're sitting here, dealing with the worst crime crisis. I'm going to increase the average salary of APD officers to number 1 in New Mexico, currently number 6. Tim didn't do that. And I'm going to make every effort to work around the non-cooperation of ICE detainers. I'm going to work with federal agencies behind the scenes to feed them information to help them crack down on crime and cartel.
Your time has expired, Mr. Aragon. Thank you. We conclude this question with Mr. Gonzalez. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Crime is the number one problem. It's impacting businesses. It's impacting tourism. It's impacting economic development. We have to wrap our arms around crime and get a handle on it. Nobody has a more extensive and comprehensive understanding of this. Nobody's more committed and has fought this crime for longer than us. And first and foremost, nobody's smarter about it. Nobody's collaborated more. And nobody has reached across the aisle more than I have, even in the attacks politically that I received, even by my own party. But this is my point. I always put people first, not politics. And what we're going to do is we're going to fleece out all the unconstitutional policies that are out there, to include sanctuary cities. And we already do cooperate with the federal agencies because nobody has collaborated more and has strategized and has a better relationship, which take decades, than I have established with our federal partners. And we are taking people off the streets, the most dangerous. And we're taking off literally hundreds of guns and tons of drugs, and breaking up criminal networks, cartels, organized gangs, all these things that we don't bolster about, but we do them on behalf of the city because that's where the problem lies. We've mitigated crime, and we have fought crime in the county. We've mitigated to the point where we've been able to jump in and help the city out because people are begging us in the city because the crime's so bad, and we've gone to the most marginalized areas, not to the places that would benefit anybody politically, but what was right for the people. And I'll continue to do the same as a mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. And now let us turn to other, hopefully less grim matters. As you all know, the city of Albuquerque provides a wide variety of public services and programs, for everything from airports to roads to community centers and even a zoo. Please tell us about 3 priorities you have for improving city government that have nothing to do with crime or homelessness. You have 2 minutes, and we will begin with Mr. Aragon.
How about just removing art for starters? It's a bad idea, and we've seen that commerce. First and foremost, I think we need to go ahead and evaluate what the cost would be rather than be told the propaganda. That has absolutely been Mr. Gonzalez talks about the crown jewel. I remember growing up on Nob Hill. I remember going to the pit. I remember going to all these places where we'd go back and forth. The art has absolutely decimated businesses, and I think the costs of that do not outweigh the benefits of raising the big flag of Nob Hill and downtown and opening things up. This newfangled thing that they've tried to establish with the Albuquerque Rapid Transit and $120 million. That's first and foremost. We've got to look at that. We've got to get rid of that and open things back up. Second, and this is a huge one, no more public-private partnerships. That's taxpayer money. There's so many things that we could be using that money for, yet we go ahead and we want to hand it to the owner of a soccer team, or we want to hand it to Netflix, or hand it to those. No one's done a cost-benefit analysis of what's happening in terms of the economic benefit for the city of Albuquerque. Certainly, we have seen all that everywhere, but a big thing that we could really do is do the third thing, is reuse that to create better venues. We are a absolute destination. People love the weather, both in the spring and in the fall, and when they come, they want to see great things, not just the balloon fiesta, the music festivals. I'm the Rock of Talk. You've got the Metal Mayor. One of the things that we haven't done is really utilize what we have as a city. Our occupancies there at the convention center and the other places, they're lower than 30%. That's job one. You got to make that pitch and bring in more money with more things that people want to see. Remember, we have a lot of rural areas around Albuquerque. Why not attract people to the city of Albuquerque throughout the rest of the state by really pushing that for more live venues, live opportunities here and not spending $70 million. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aragon. Mr. Gonzalez, your next 3 priorities for city government that have to do with crime or homelessness. You have 2 minutes.
Absolutely. But first and foremost, I would size the mayor's office. I would replace a lot of the political appointees that have high salaries with competent professionals that understand the role of government and understand the direction and the positive direction that Albuquerque deserves. I would create staffing to provide the services that the people are lacking in any department. So I would increase sales, especially in the business side, with inspectors, licensing. And then I would also evaluate all the policies that make it so difficult for people to do business, build a house, or develop a subdivision. I would review all those type of things aside from it, and then actually use the money when we audit certain programs and apply them to beautifying the city, because the state of the city from what is in the worst condition it's ever been in the history of Albuquerque. That's gotten worse and continues to get worse over the last several years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Mr. Keller, to close this question, you have 2 minutes.
All right. Well, thank you. And I think I want to honor this question the same way Eddie did with some talk about the future and the vision. But look, I just have to say the city is not in the worst condition it's ever been in. Anyone who grew up here in the 90s knows that. And also, just to defend the professionals of the city. I mean, it's okay if you don't like me, that's fine. But Lawrence Rael, Sarita Nair, we have incredible people running the city. And I hope any mayor candidate would continue that tradition. So here's what I would do. I think we need more things for families and kids, number one. And this is something I wanted to do. The pandemic kind of got in the way. But I want to make sure that literally every single person in Albuquerque knows what they can do after school and on the weekend and during the summer with their kids, or in some cases without their kids because maybe they have to work or do other things. And we do that now for about half the kids in Albuquerque, but I want to do it for every single kid. The second thing I want to do is I do think we need to lean in and finish the gateway. And I will tell you that I'm just telling you, we can't actually fix a lot of these other problems until we commit as a city, regardless of who's mayor, to actually delivering services. And that's just a building to do it in. We've got to do that. The second thing is the stadium is a good debate. You know, my vision of the stadium is another Isotope Stadium. It will bring people from other areas, as Eddie mentioned. It can be a way to facilitate arts and culture when there isn't a game going on. I view it as a giant outdoor museum and performance space. And I think the city, I know the city, if it happens, will own it. So the team's just going to rent it for their games. And so I do think that will lift us up to a real pride point in the Southwest region.
All right, thank you, Mr. Keller, and stay on. You're coming up next for the next question, which is about the pandemic. COVID-19 is, of course, a global problem, and much of the public policy surrounding it is managed out of Washington and Santa Fe. Still, what role, if any, do you think the city has in managing the pandemic? You have 1.5 minutes, and Mr. Keller to start.
Well, managing the pandemic is a summary of, at least half of everything, if not more, that I've been doing for the last 18 months. And Albuquerque took a very different strategy than many cities, and it was a leadership strategy. It said, number one, we are going to do everything we can to help people during the pandemic. So we fought to bolster the safety net, whether it was issues around eviction, whether it was literally supporting small businesses that would have gone out of business, to rolling out 20 million plus in economic development programs that even included artists and entrepreneurs. It also meant pushing out $300 million in capital investment. That's why you see 2 new community centers being built on Route 66. That's why you see a giant library on Route 66. It's why you see cranes up for the first time in many years in our city building things, and you see working families being employed. These were all as a result of actions that we were able to take during the pandemic. But also we kept our parks open. We said we have to have places for our families to go. We kept open space open. And we also enforced the public health order, but we did it with compliance. We said, just do the right thing, follow the law, and you'll be fine. We didn't punish people. We didn't shame people. We said, we're all in this together. And that's what we're prepared to do again this fall if we need to.
Thank you, Mr. Keller. Mr. Aragon.
As you know, I've been a huge proponent of medical choice and allowing people to make their own decisions based upon what they choose to do. My body, my choice has applied for other things as the abortion capital of the world, versus it doesn't apply when it comes to injecting yourself with a needle. There's plenty of people who are vaxxed and they have made that decision to go ahead and do it. It's not an actual vaccination. So these state health orders that come in, our mayor has not stood up to the governor, and neither has our sheriff. I was thrown out of a business as they were enforcing mask orders from the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office. Somebody has to stand up and say enough is enough. We've been, quote unquote, leading the charge, been on the bleeding edge of shutting things down. Our local economy has been decimated. We have the highest unemployment rate in the entire country. Albuquerque itself is not a place for commerce. At this point, this is what COVID has had on it. But, there is a public safety component that does have to go ahead and keep people safe, but it also is people's individual responsibility to go ahead and make that decision on their own. We can provide the opportunity. We can certainly provide the opportunity for these people to get tested and vaxxed and everything else. But again, it's their choice, and we can enforce certain things that make sense. But none of what we've done for the last 18 months here in the city of Albuquerque has made sense. We have shut down our city. There was no need to comply with many of those orders that have come down. They have seemed absolutely insane. And I, for one, can tell you what an ounce of prevention is much better than what we've been doing with this COVID cure.
Mr. Aragon, thank you. And to close out the question, Mr. Gonzalez, the city's role in managing the pandemic.
Well, I work for the people, and this is the government of the people. I never have put a political party or political agendas in front of the people's needs. Those are individual rights by each and every person. And so for us, we support those rights. It's up to parents to decide whether their kids need masks. Obviously, in public places, that's another issue. We didn't get caught up in administrative orders. What was most pressing for people, and we listened to them, and we followed through, was crime. And I fought crime, and our staff fought crime smartly to the point where it got the attention of the Attorney General of the United States and the President. And we needed help, and the people needed help. And when they needed help, that's where we delivered it. The pandemic can't have a one-size-fits-all. You need to tailor it for the needs of the people. You can't shut down their businesses, where this state is already economically the worst in the country. And why would you infringe on people's rights to open up their private businesses, which were ruled in the Supreme Court, to adhere to party politics. You have to put people before politics, and I always will.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Our next question is, if elected, will you retain the chief of police? And if not, who would you appoint? You have 1 minute. We'll start with Mr. Aragon.
Great question. And I want to go back and say, without answering it directly yet, that we have to evaluate. A lot of people would look at a guy like me and say, oh, he's just going to clean house and get rid of everybody. I know lots of people who work for the city of Albuquerque. They're big supporters of me, you know, my radio station, what I talk about. And I would want to talk to each and every person. Police officers, I have a great relationship with the Albuquerque Police Officers Association, you know, the Economic Development Group, the Planning Group. These are all people that I know. And I can tell you very quickly, I'd want to know what their vision. These people have 10, 15, 20, 30 years invested. People who don't want to retire. They care about what they want to do. So I'd love to sit down with Chief Medina. And I'd first want to understand, what has he learned in his long time with the Albuquerque Police Department before just dismissing him outright. We're going to approach everybody as if they care about the city of Albuquerque. We're going to understand their vision. They'll hear my vision. And together we're going to come up with a solution. But as it currently stands, given the drama between Medina and Geyer, I would probably have leave.
Your time is expired.
Thank you.
Mr. Gonzalez, you are next. 1 minute.
Yes, in my current understanding of the way they've organized the structure of the mayor's office to the police chief, there's another person in between, which is a CEO of the city. Not only would I replace the chief of police, but also would replace that person that's in charge, because those are the exact issues that over-politicize a police department, which is supposed to be the neutral body of the government to provide the services that protect people's most sacred things. Those are three things: their rights, their lives, and their property. And there has to be a direct accountability from the chief to the mayor, and that would be done day one.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Mr. Keller, 1 minute.
Sure. Well, a couple of things. I think first, look, I really respect and appreciate the concept that these officers have been trying hard to keep our city safe for much of their career. And so I would hope anyone would certainly talk to them and listen to them. And also, you know, there are laws that govern our city that the mayor can't control. So the CAO is by charter in charge of all the police officers. So you can't just eliminate that because you want to. And so I think the long story short is, if our crew in aggregate, all of the brass and all of the leaders are making progress on crime that's real, are making progress on reform that's real, and they're increasing confidence in the community and in the department, then I will absolutely keep them.
All right, thank you, Mr. Keller. Let's move on to our next question here. And this is, and as you can probably tell, we're going from the questions that were submitted ahead of time to the questions that were submitted during this forum, so it's a bit more on the fly right now. Your position on sanctuary cities, we'll give you 1 minute for that and start with Mr. Keller.
Peter, was that?
Yes, that was for your position on sanctuary cities.
Yeah, okay. So, you know, this is another good example. I understand if people have different opinions, that's fine. This is a city ordinance. So once again, a mayor can't just wave a magic wand and change everything. But I support our city ordinance. We're an immigrant-friendly city. I have supported immigrants regardless of documentation since I was a state senator and since I was a state auditor. I take an oath to protect and help everyone in my community. There is nothing in that oath that speaks to any kind of formal documentation. And that's why I honor that oath. And I think it's very important that we have trust between our police officers and the immigrant community. And you cannot have that if you are using anti-immigrant rhetoric, if you're supporting deportations, and frankly, if you're buying into Donald Trump and Attorney General Barr's agenda. That makes our city less safe.
Thank you, Mr. Keller. Mr. Aragon, sanctuary cities.
I am absolutely in total disagreement with the city ordinance. I would use the bully pulpit of the mayor's office to put the people of Albuquerque first. I'm dead set against sanctuary cities. I will continue to repeat that. We don't need to be one. And I can tell you that Mayor Keller did not cash a $10 million check because he was more focused on playing the politics in an election year and was speaking out directly to Donald Trump with the ridiculousness of making signs that, you know, we nothing's good here from Donald Trump. Let me tell you something. As a Hispanic 11th generation and somebody who knows many people who were legal immigrants who've come in, the biggest people who are opposed to illegal immigration and becoming a sanctuary city are legal immigrants. These are people who've worked hard. They've worked through the system. They paid the price because they love this country. And I can tell you right now, putting the citizens of Albuquerque first ahead of the legal immigrants who come in, and you know how they pay their way to get here, we'll be putting...
Thank you, Mr. Aragon. Your time has expired.
Thank you. Sorry.
Mr. Gonzalez, to close out the question on sanctuary cities, 1 minute. And you're muted, sir.
I would go through a legal review and examine to see if that sanctuary city policy is deemed constitutional. If it is not, I would use my executive office and power to remove that through a legal review. And if you want to really look at it from a basic standpoint, a community standpoint, and a people standpoint, this is a minority majority state. And that is a very divisive policy because it pits immigrants against minorities. And anything that pits people against each other is bad. And so I would say we already have United States immigration laws. We should adhere to them, especially as elected officials, because we took a constitutional oath, and I've never breached that. So I would make sure that those policies are deemed constitutional, and then if not, we don't enforce them or we don't honor them because they would be deemed null and void. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. And our lightning round continues. If voters approve, one of you will begin your term later this year with a standing order to construct a new soccer stadium and at least $50 million with which to do it. Where should such a stadium be constructed and why? You have 1 minute. Mr. Aragon goes first.
It shouldn't. We have other priorities. There isn't a bond that we don't like here in the city of Albuquerque. I am willing to challenge, and I'm glad that it's on the ballot, and it made the ballot 2 nights ago on city council. You will find that the voters are going to be dead set against it, especially in this COVID crisis. There wasn't one game, not one game that was played in front of a crowd in all of 2020. I understand the need for a different venue at a different time. This is not the time to go ahead and construct a new stadium. If we get there, and I don't think that we will, and we're thinking about a place to put a brand new stadium, as being a former resident of downtown, we'll evaluate that. But as a commercial real estate guy, we'll look at traffic counts, we'll look at everything else. If that's something that they wanted, I can tell you there's nobody better to have a better understanding of what's happening in terms of the attraction. I worked at the First Baptist Church, the Metro Center. I was a commercial real estate broker. I'm going to tell you where the best place to put it. But I can tell you the voters come November are going to turn out en masse to turn down the new soccer stadium at a cost of $50 million to the taxpayers.
Thank you, Mr. Aragon. Mr. Gonzalez, 1 minute.
Can you repeat?
Yes. Where would you construct a new soccer stadium and why in that place? And you're muted right now.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Rice. So are you asking me if it's approved or if it's or my position on it? I'm confused.
If voters approve, you will begin your term with more or less a standing order to build a new soccer stadium. So I'm wondering where would you build it and why? Okay,
Mr. Rice. So if it's approved, I would go through intensive research of where we're going to get the most economic bang for our buck and identify that location for commerce and ensure that it's in the best interest of everybody that's in the metro area. And I would take that approach. So I would people and identify that area, the economic developers of this community to identify that place in Albuquerque. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Mr. Kelly, you have 1 minute.
Sure. Well, number one is I want to make sure it's a multi-use stadium. I want to make sure that the city owns it, just like we do isotopes. And I want to make sure that we've got partners putting in real funding, just like we did for the isotope stadium. And we did fund a giant study that said it should go downtown, and it doesn't mean that's right. I'm actually open to putting it anywhere, but I gotta understand a little bit of logic about cities. And most great cities, big and small, even minor league and AAA teams, they have successful stadiums downtown. But I think Eddie raises a good point. This is a real estate transaction, and so if we can't find the available property and people won't sell us that land and get it like elsewhere. Also, I want to make sure the neighborhoods are okay with it and that it lifts up neighborhoods. And so I'm going to be very sensitive to that aspect as well.
All right, thank you, Mr. Keller. Next question. The Albuquerque Police Department is in the middle of a court-approved settlement agreement. This topic is of particular importance to the person who submitted this question, being an impacted individual that has lost a loved one in the middle of a mental health crisis who was shot by the responding department. What are your plans to see APD through the CASA process? You have 1 minute, and we'll begin with Mr. Gonzalez.
So I would work with the leadership of the Albuquerque Police Department and work with the monitor and get compliance. So there's been so many setbacks and so many excuses made is figure out if the monitor is actually compliant through a legal review, and then set the goalpost, because oftentimes we're saying they're being moved. But more importantly is change the leadership, which has been very distracting for the direction of the police department and the services of the people, and hold people accountable there. And make sure that the chief of police that we select is competent enough to support and select the staff and surround themselves with the legal staff and the administrative police staff he needs to get that job done, and without any compromises to public safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Mr. Keller, 1 minute.
Well, I just have to, I can't not express that our chief is competent, and so was the chief before him. And I just wouldn't say that about anyone in law enforcement. You might not agree with them, but they're competent. And I know clearly the sheriff said he's the smartest person on law enforcement. So I just disagree. And so, look, here's the deal with reform. Number one is we created the superintendent position to drive that reform and make sure that we had a chief who could focus on crime. I think it's really important to keep that structure. It's innovative, and both the officers like it, the reform folks like it. This is the kind of innovation that we need to keep going forward with. And also, none of this is easy. I mean, I would just tell you, I'm the second mayor, whoever it is next time will be the third mayor, to just say that you can wash this away by saying things. I think that's a disjustice to the family you mentioned. If this was that easy, we wouldn't have those problems. And so to honor the memory of those who have been victims.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Your time has expired. Mr. Aragon, to close out this question, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. Manny does have another year on his term, and he certainly has talked about converging APD with BCSO to alleviate, using cameras, non-compliance, or what have you. We have seen the hem and hawing that's coming from a lot of people complaining about the DOJ. Look, we've got to accelerate our compliance as quickly as possible. If we're going to complain about it, let's just shut up about it, get fully compliant. But the ACLU sent me a question about this entire thing and said, would you continue to do everything that is in place that has been set by the DOJ? And the fact is, no, we're going to run our own police department. So we're going to accelerate, get everything above board. I think we have another 5 years, maybe 4 years left on this thing. We need to be fully compliant. That way we can push the DOJ out of here. We can run our own City of Albuquerque Police Department, because it's not being run right. And it really puts an undue stress, handcuffs our officers, handcuffs our ability to have law enforcement here in the city of Albuquerque. And look what's happened. Our police officers have been afraid to do
your time is expired. Thank you, sir. And we've I'm afraid we are just about out of time here this evening, but by way of closing out, we wanted to give each of you a chance to give a brief closing statement. It'll be 1 minute long, and Mr. Keller will go first.
Well, great to have a discussion, and I know this is just the beginning. And, I think, look, there's one stark thing that I think it's important people highlight. It's very easy to just say things. It's a different thing to actually understand what a mayor can do. A judge is in charge of our DOJ and our police reform process. A mayor can't fix that, and it's for good reason. And you got to honor that to get things done. I also think just saying we should do things like cut overtime, that would descend our city into chaos. We need overtime right now to adequately police our city. And I also want to think about this notion that, the city is somehow different than the county. The county's crime rate, it was on the front page of the Journal, is just as bad as the city. So look, I think we need a mayor who's going to keep us moving forward. And he knows the difference between a talking point and actually crafting policy and moving our city forward. And I want to keep rolling out the thousands of new jobs that we lined up during the recovery. I want to step up big for the unhoused by finishing the Gateway Center. And I want to make sure
I'm afraid.
To move forward.
Mr. Gonzalez, your closing statement, 1 minute.
Yes, Mr. Rice. In closing, I want everybody to take the opportunity for this opportunity to join our campaign so everybody can thrive. If people don't want the same results they are getting from this incumbent, they should vote for me, Manny Gonzalez. My track record speaks for itself. Look at what I've done as a sheriff. I've done a lot more with less money, less resources. We can do great things with $250 million budgets with the Albuquerque Police Department. I'm asking for the citizens and their support and their vote to restore Albuquerque as a crown jewel of the Southwest. And I appreciate everybody having me on today. I'd like to thank the candidates. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Mr. Aragon, to close us out here, 1 minute.
The track record of our leadership, both in Bernalillo County as well as the city of Albuquerque, is abysmal. That's why I stepped up. I'm here sharing my vision. I want to lead this city out of the doldrums, and we want to go from failure to first. This isn't about politics. I love the city. I grew up in Martinez Town. I have 2 children here, and I want them to be here. I got to tell you, we all love the city, but I know this city better than my opponents. And let me tell you, I'm going to fight for the 505. That's why I want you to go to fightfor505.com. It's not about me. It's not about race. It's not about anything other than the 5 C's that we're going to focus on, which, of course, is our city first. No one's going to run our city better. We're going to get rid of how we handle COVID here in the city of Albuquerque. We're going to restore commerce. I will tackle crime each and every single day. We do it every day here. And more than anybody, I'm the guy who can battle corruption. So join our campaign. Have a lot of fun. Let's take the city back. Fightfor505.com. Thank you for your time and your invitation.
Thank you, Mr. Aragon. And that concludes our candidate forum this evening. On behalf of Downtown Albuquerque News and the Near North Valley Neighborhood Association, thanks ever so much to the candidates for their participation, and on a more personal note, for their cooperation on the tight time limits. Speaking of which, I also want to thank our timer, Mr. Ernest Gonzalez. His work really helped us maximize the number of questions we were able to ask this evening. And for those of you watching at home, thank you for doing so and for your support of our local democracy. Voting begins in less than 2 months and concludes on November 2nd. For information on how to register to vote, please visit nnvote.org. You will also be able to request your mail-in ballot on that site in the coming weeks. That's all from me tonight. Thanks again, and I will leave you in the capable hands of Merritt Tully.
Thank you very much, and thank you very, very much, candidates. We wish you each the best of luck.